Hello and welcome to the Software Engineering Unlocked podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michaela, and today I have the pleasure to talk to Alex Schladebeck. Alex is the CEO of Bredex, a dev shop that offers tailor-made IT solutions but also specializes in quality assurance and testing. I met Alex at the EclipseCon, a conference for Eclipse and Java developers ages ago. There she led workshops for devs and testers to improve their testing strategy by using an UI testing tool that was also developed by Bredex. When we met afterwards for drinks and chit-chat, Alex told me she actually has a linguistic degree and came into software development more or less by accident because she helped the company improve the documentation. Fast forward a decade and she's now one of the heads of this company. If that doesn't sound like a story that needs to be told. So I'm super thrilled to have Alex here with me. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Michaela. I'm really pleased to be here.
Yeah, I'm also really happy. So, Alex, looking back 10 years from today, or something like 10 years, would you have imagined that you are going to be the CEO of Bredex?
No, 10 years ago, definitely not. Over the last few years, it became when I became a team lead, and I knew that one of the current CEOs was going to be leaving. So we have three, and I knew one of them was leaving. And at that point, I was like, oh, is this maybe a thing that I could be? Is that is that possible? But I think 10 years ago, um, I'm not so great with the sort of 5-year plans for me personally. And so 10 years ago, I would have probably been like, oh, my aim this year is to go on a nice holiday and teach more people about testing. That would have been it. So I 10 years ago, no, and yeah, it kind of started to get more concrete as the years went on.
So, more or less, it grew on you, or it grew on you.
Yeah, much like software development itself, actually, and IT. I am I'm a great believer in exploring. One of the my favorite approaches to testing is exploratory testing. The idea that we find something out and we learn from that, and what we've learned we put into practice in our next steps. And I think that's a very agile way of doing things, and I also think that's how I tend to do things. I go and explore something, and then I find out what that means, and then I learn something, and then I adapt it, and that's been basically every step of my way, just doing things and seeing what opportunities come up, and saying, yeah, I think that I want that, and going for them.
And so, before you became the CEO, what was your last title or role, or what were your responsibilities? Were they already like similar? You said like you were a project lead and things like this. Were similar to what you have, or the responsibilities that you have now, or very different?
So my last title, and I've and I've kept it because it was important to me, is as head of quality. So in that role, I am still, obviously, I'm delegating more, because I have to. But in that role, I'm still responsible for what strategy do we have, how are we working in projects with customers, what things do customers need, what what things are coming up in the future in terms of testing and quality that we need to be aware of. How are we making sure that quality isn't just brought into teams via testers, but also that developers are working on that, whole team quality, all these kind of things. And that was alongside that role, that's kind of the domain role that I had. And I was also a team lead, which meant that I was responsible for, I was a line manager for various people, and that's something that's stayed, obviously. Over the last few years, the company's really been working towards making sure that we move decision making capabilities closer to the people who are affected by the decisions and who are able to actually make the better decisions. So, being a team lead in some ways was very, very similar to the things I'm doing now, because a lot of the time it's the group of team leads that makes the decision and not somebody at the top, as it were, saying, no, we're going to do this. What's changed though is that, and I still find myself doing this, if I have a question, I'm like, oh, I don't know how we're going to deal with this, and we're not coming to a conclusion with all of the team leads. In my mind, I still go to one of the other CEOs to be like, hey, what are we going to do about this? And I'm trying to catch myself doing that now and be like, wait a second, Alex, this might be something that you have to learn to answer. So instead of kind of going up and being like, I have this question, to think, okay, what would I do about this right now? And then I can still go and test that and see how someone else with more experience would react. That's the big gap for me right now. Realizing that it's not necessarily the case that somebody else is going to give me all of the answers. I might be responsible for more of the answers now.
Yeah, yeah. So I think right now there are much more people with a non-traditional background in tech, just because the resources are there. I mean, I don't know how you experience it, but 15 years back, right, when I started, or even a little bit longer, the internet existed, but it was not that you just went on and you learned whatever you need to know, right? It was really, there was not a lot of information, and you had to go to, you know, libraries and get books, and even books were a scarce resource, I think. Information and knowledge wasn't there. Maybe you needed, I mean, I hear it often, right? You needed less knowledge as you need today, but because of that, I think there were not so many people that came from a non-traditional background. So I think you really stood out at EclipseCon at that point, when you were saying, well, actually, I studied linguistics and not computer science, or or did some background, or have some background education in this. And so uh, what and now I think there are more people, with this non-traditional background, and I think they want to know, how can I move from where I am, because I think it's still hard, right? It's still hard. You have to know so much. So even though there is more information now available, you have to know more, right? So the bar somehow has been raised, I think. And it's still really hard, I think, to start into tech and really be successful there. So if you think back, did you know how you came from this non-techie background into a techie background, right? So I imagine it like this, right? You start by reading tech documentation and they try to improve it. And so you have to learn about what you want to improve. And so this somehow transformed you into a techie from a non-techie. But I guess there were different steps that you had to take, maybe learn something on the side, or do a workshop or whatnot. So how did you do this transition into tech?
Yeah, it was, I mean, the short answer is that it's a long transition and it's still ongoing, right? I mean, I'm never going to be done learning. Um, at the very beginning, it was incredibly difficult, but in a challenging way. I'm not the kind of person that likes being in my comfort zone. I like being in my learning zone. I sometimes push myself into my panic zone, which is maybe not ideal. And I think I was lucky at the time because when I started, it was basically a summer job, so the stakes were low. I could, if I wanted to, I could move back home. That was the plan after 2 months, to move back home. That plan didn't work, and in those 2 months, it was a nice safe space to just be like, well, I don't know anything about this. I mean, and I thought I was just going to be translating, which was something I could definitely do, and I wasn't. I was writing the documentation, and it was with all kinds of tools and markup languages that I didn't even know what a markup language was. I mean, like, um, and so at that time I said, okay, who can sit next to me and help me? Who can I go and ask for questions? I've never been afraid of just approaching people and asking for help. I did some reading. I made a lot of mistakes, and that really gave me, just those first 2 months, I think, made me realize, wait a second, even though this is something I've never ever done before, I am capable of learning here as well. And I was already noticing that some of the questions I was asking, that they were actually quite useful to the people I was working with. Um, and one of my teammates asked me last year. She said, "Okay, how can I become okay? How can I become more technical?" And I'm doing air quotes because there's this whole idea about people who are and aren't technical. And I read a fantastic thing the other day in a book about language that says that anyone who is capable of using any tool, like the apes used to hit things with, we are technical as humans. We are technical. What she meant, and what I mean with it is knowing more about the specific tools and techniques and methods that we use in software development. And I think some of the things that I started doing deliberately, where I would go to our company all hands meetings, listen to talks about features in Java or frameworks, and I understood practically nothing. To just really sit there and go, if I'm lucky, I've understood the problem statements. And this is something that I always look at now when I'm reviewing people's talks or whatever. I don't care where it goes, but if I don't understand what the problem was in the first place, then I think that that's a bad sign of a badly structured talk. And sometimes when I understood the problem and I'm like, okay, I think I understood this, then I would go and ask someone afterwards, either the speaker or someone who I trusted to to give me an answer that I would understand and be patient with me. And over many, many, many weeks and years, you start realizing that, oh, I know this. And then I added on, and then I went and put myself in the situation where I'd be at conferences and listening to talks I didn't understand, or I'd work closer with developers or other people. And I think it's just being comfortable with throwing yourself reasonably constantly into something where you're like, I do not know this. And accepting the pain of feeling stupid and not knowing something, especially if you've come from some other kind of I got really good results for my linguistics degree. Like and then feeling kind of stupid even sometimes, because you're like, "Ugh, I just can't get this." I took part in some courses. I did a Java development course. I've done it a few times, and I think the third time it finally stuck. And now I would say I understand actually a bit of Java, and now no one uses it anymore, right? No, no, it's still very much used. But the first time it was very much a course for people who already already used three languages and just needed to figure out how Java works. And I was just like, by day two, we were onto arrays, and I swear to God, I spent so much time learning about arrays, and then I found out that there's something called lists, which make your life easier. I'm like, I feel really like, why would you do this to me? Um, but but doing all of that, I always got the feedback that the things that I'd learned, when I was then asking questions, that people were like, that's a good question. And I realized that fed into my testing and fed into my exploration around other things, and that the questions I was asking, because of the things I'd learned, that they were good questions. So I always had that feedback of knowing I was on the right way. And that's how I still do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, do you have the feeling? I probably right now you have, but when was the time that you felt you arrived, that you belong in tech, that or did you have this feeling very early on already?
I think I can't remember exactly the dates of it, but I think that the few pivotal moments for me was, and this must have only been about a year or 2 years maybe after I joined the company, but I was playing World of Warcraft. So first of all, I was playing World of Warcraft. Obviously, I'm a techie now. um, and something went wrong, and I instinctively knew that probably what it was just a UI problem, and I needed to refresh. And that moment of, I understand how things work, and I have an assumption, and it turned out to be a correct one, but even if it wasn't correct, I have an assumption of what is going to happen here and what I need to do. That was one of the moments. Around about that time, at some point, I made a joke that was like a computer science joke, and I was like, wow, I used to be cool. Actually, and that's a lie. I never used to be cool. I'm just geeky in a lot of different ways now, and that's fine. And then around about the time, I think it was 2007, maybe 2008, when I started going to conferences and talking about the things that I was learning and the things I knew. I was like, wow, I'm 5 years, 3 years out of uni, and I'm speaking at a developer conference, and I'm not even a developer. Hee hee. So I think those were definitely the points. And I've been so lucky to always be surrounded by people who supported me and never made me feel like I was other. Um, uh, and who have been like, it's actually good to have your perspective in on this. So it was pretty early on, and I still definitely have my days when I'm like, oh God, I'll never understand all of this, and I still don't think I really knew what Kubernetes does. Like, it's like it keeps changing, and there keeps being more things. But I'm I'm good. I'm good at buzzword bingo, and I think I'm better at than just buzzword bingo. So I keep learning and I keep asking, and I feel very much like I belong here. And it's nice to look around and see that I am not the only person like me who also belongs here. That definitely has changed, like you were saying.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe to give also my listeners a little bit of background, can you tell me a little bit about Bredex and also how this company grew over the last years, right? So what was Bredex 10 years ago? I think companies also change, right? The identity of companies change, the direction where they think are going or what they're becoming changes, or maybe it stays the same. I don't know. But I think there is some, change in every aspect of our life. And also, you mentioned it really briefly that you came for the internship, but you are actually from England, right? And so Bredex is actually a German-based company. So can you tell me us a little bit, like, what are the roots of Bredex and where are you heading towards?
Yeah. So when I joined in 2005, there were fewer than 30 people who worked at the company. I was the only person who wasn't a developer. I mean, we had a back office and like a secretary, but I was the only person in Teams that wasn't a developer. Um, and so I was the first. That was that was a big, and I think I was the first, like, people had come from different backgrounds like physics or other things, but they had all become developers, and I wasn't going to be that. So that was a big. I didn't see it at the time, but that was probably a big moment for the company. Now that I can see it from the other perspective, and they took a chance on me, which I thought was fantastic. Um, and now I'll fast forward and then I'll go to the bits in between. Now we have 150 employees. I do know most of all of the names, and I have to practice because the difference between knowing 30 names and knowing 150 names is big. So I do practice because that's incredibly important to me, to know who people are, and making sure that I can say hi to them and I know what they're doing. Um, that has become something that's become just more effort. It used to be the case I knew everybody and their husband or wife's name and their dogs and their cats, and now I know that mostly for my team. And yeah, for other people, you just have to go out and talk to them and make sure that there are enough opportunities to talk outside of your own team. Um, we have we have grown and diversified a great deal, and I think one of the big changes is definitely in terms of how we are structured as a company. So up until 2013, like I say, we've always had three CEOs, and up in 2013, the original CEO left, and I believe you might have met him as well. His name was Achim Breda, which is where the name comes from, Bredex. He retired, and he'd been the founder, and that started a shift that was necessary, not because he'd done things wrong, but because we definitely were growing. So we could no longer have the one person at the top who knew everything and was making all of the decisions. That just, even three people, right? That just doesn't scale at some point. And it's not agile. It's not a good way of doing things. And we believe very much in having an agile mindset and learning and adapting and being resilient. One word that I prefer not to talk about people or companies being strong, because that sounds kind of brittle. It sounds like a thing that you have or you don't have and it can break. I like to talk about resilience, because that means that it's something you can practice, it's something elastic, and it means I'm adapting to whatever this new situation is and I'm showing strength through that. But it's not just this thing I have already. And so over the last few years, we've done a lot of work in, like I say, having this. Yes, it's a hierarchy. So I hope we're not doing it wrong, and I don't think we're doing it wrong. If it was bad, it basically would be, oh, it's just another level of management to get to the management. But the focus has been on very much those people who are these team leads are responsible for their own decisions in their own departments and cross department, and we have to work together. It can't just be this kind of I'm in my box and I don't care about your box mentality. So we do a lot of talking. We make sure that we're making decisions quickly, and or even delegating decisions back to project leads or back to people themselves. Um, and obviously, sometimes there's things that we at the C level need to say, okay, this is the direction we're going in, or this is, no, sorry, this is how we want to do it. That doesn't happen all of that often, because we have good people who we've trained to think not like us. And it's still hard for me to talk about us because I'm still getting used to being there instead of at the other level. Um, Not everybody thinks the same. Everybody brings in their own perspective, and then we work through that. Um, and that's, I think, the big change that we've had, in terms of culture and working together. And it's fascinating and interesting to see. And we still have work to do. There are some things that we notice, okay, that's still maybe a vestige or a remnant of when we were a lot smaller and it used to work like that. And we find those things and we find them painful, and then we find a way of dealing with them. And I think that that's normal.
Yeah. And so the main focus of this company is this tailored software development for other companies, or what are the core functionality? I looked on the website and it definitely changed also over time, right? I mean, with 30 people, you're doing something different than with 150 people. Um, but so what is the heart of what you offer at Bredex?
Yeah, the heart is that we offer software solutions for things that need, I mean, the new word is things that need to be digitalized, right? But that's just the word. If you have a process that is either being done manually or being done partially manually or being done in, let's say, Excel, um, and you need software for that for various reasons. And so the heart of what we really do is we say we can work with the people who need that software to find out what they really need, get it to you, get it rolled out to you, and that's been one of our most important things for a long time. We don't just do that in the sense of, okay, here's the team of software developers. Since I started, we've also had quality assurance being embedded into teams for a few years now. We've also had UX, we also have data protection. So we say all of the things that really need to belong to a software project, we put them in at the right time so that these things don't end up being forgotten or done at the end. Um, and of course, then once you do have like domains like quality assurance and UX and data protection, those are things that, so sometimes we just go to customers just to do one of those things, right? But I'd say 80% of our business is that we are working either alone as a company or with other companies, because we partner a lot, because partnering is important. Um, that we are working in teams where we have all or most of these roles fulfilled.
Mhm. And so, can I imagine that the other companies that are hiring you, do they normally have their own IT department, or are these companies that don't have their IT, or they don't have their programmers and developers?
Yeah, sometimes yes, sometimes no. I mean, we're active in some rather large companies where they do have their own IT, and we are one of many, many, many people who are working for them. That's and that's something that we're very, very good at, like being able to do software for kind of a huge conglomeration or a concern, being able to make sure that you're delivering value. I'm going to say, despite a lot of the processes and hoops that you have to jump through and things that you're like, but this makes no sense right now. But still being able to have those conversations with customers and get things through the door and make sure that things happen. That's a skill that I am very proud that we have, and I think that there are a lot of people that don't do that as well as we can. Um, the other side is, and this is something we're moving into more and more, is yeah, going to customers who don't have their own IT department and saying, what do you need? That brings whole new interesting challenges, because if you're very used to working with customers who, even if sometimes you're like, okay, this process is maybe a bit weird, but sure, that's the process. If you're working with customers who've never done IT before, you actually have quite a lot of work to do to teach them what it's about, and that uh, it's fascinating. It's because all of the things that we know and just live and breathe, they're going to not assume the same things that we do, and it's our job as a good company to make sure that they know what's going on, what they can expect, what we expect from them as well. Um, and that's the thing that we've been working on in the last couple of years as well.
Yeah. So, what I ask, especially if I have people on my show that run software projects or develop software for others, is how much of the processes are you dictating, or are you keeping on to and say, well, we are not going to change that, right? So even if you're developing software for you, these are the things like how we are doing it, and we are not super flexible on going around here. And what are the things that you say, well, we can work with your process over here, or even with your good process over here?
Yeah, so I think the easy way of saying it, that anything that's reasonably internal to the development team is is something where we really say, look, this is where we are the experts. So we do work with customers who have they have an external testing department that their testers or their quality assurance processes have to it's there in the process. They have to do it. They have to take a look at the things, and we're like, okay, that's fine, we're not going to be able to convince you not to do that, but we are still going to have an embedded tester in the team. We're going to have lots of automation. We're going to use, even if the project itself is still reasonably waterfally, which some of them are, especially for legacy systems that have been going on for so long. They are so important for the customer. They are running, and there's, to be fair, there's no need to do them in an agile way because we know the technology and we know the scope and we know what we need to do. But at the same time, because we're developing, we're saying, okay, we need to have automated tests at various levels. This is what we're doing. Your test team can look at it later, fine. And if they find anything we've missed, then we'll learn from that. But we kind of assume that they're not going to find anything bad. So that's something where we say, sorry, that's how we do it professionally. For other things, in terms of like, we would really prefer to go through a different process of how we get the project and how we get paid for it, right? We can request all we like, but there's that probably, or if I think everyone who works in software companies or any company will know. So yeah, we'd like to have a 14 days payment, and the big concern is like, that's nice that you want that, but we're going to say no. so so there are always going to be those kind of factors, and again, here a lot of it comes down to human communication. People can be very pragmatic and follow the correct processes, but be pragmatic as well. But you have to have that trust. You have to be able to be having those conversations with your direct customer contacts so that they know, okay, if I do this, which is maybe not 100% exactly how it should be, but it gets us close enough, I need to know that that's going to be fine for me. And that's the trust that you've got to build up.
Yeah, so I think you are the right person on my show to ask that question. I ask that quite often, but I'm really interested in your answer, and you hinted a little bit to it here already. Is so now everything is going like agile, or continuous deployment, continuous integration. I guess you're doing that at Bredex as well. What is the role of testing? I'm still baffled with that, right? I get different answers, and most of the answers that I get here on my podcast, I'm not super satisfied with them. Like they are like, oh, but there's no concrete answer. So maybe I tried with, I would say, a tester. I think you're a tester by
Yep,
heart.
I am.
And so how do you see that? What is the role? I mean, automated testing, I totally understand. I mean, this is the backbone of uh, DevOps, right? And this continuous integration, continuous deployment, that you have your tests and they are running instantly
Ish.
depending on depending on how large they are and how long they run. But let's say within minutes, hours, something like this, right? But what do we do with manual testing? How does this plug into? When are we activating our manual testers to test something new? And are they testing over and over again the same thing? Or how are you handling that?
Yeah, so I have very strong, what's the nice word? Strongly held loose opinions. Or loosely held strong opinions. That's the correct way. So
That's
I'm
the
I'm
correct
always
one.
willing
Yeah.
to learn. I'm always willing to learn more on this. But my experience and sort of my crystal ball really puts me in a very specific way, which is I believe firmly, and this is never going to be a 100% situation. I even have examples of teams that don't do it like this and they're fine. However, I believe firmly that um, having a tester role on a team instead of just having testing competencies is a good idea. I have and I have multiple reasons for this. First of all, we said it at the beginning, you said at the beginning, there is so much going on now. Even developers say, come on, I'm actually more front end or I'm on back end. So even within development, we're seeing much more of a split from this full stack to there is too much, I cannot do everything. And I don't understand how we can get into the idea that these people who are saying development itself is too big and I need to focus, that they would also say, oh, but sure, I can also be enough of a specialist in testing and UX and data protection and business analysis as well. That's ridiculous. Anyone, I believe that anyone who understands the Agile Manifesto or Scrum as the dev team is only developers and they all have to be able to do anything, I believe that they have maybe fundamentally misunderstood it. Cross-functional teams and diversity is good for us. So, and I, in terms of what is the role, I see testers, and it's very context dependent, but I see them doing things like exploratory testing as soon as features are ready or even before. I see them pairing with developers on things like unit tests and TDD. I see them organizing ensemble testing sessions or ensemble programming sessions, because that's something that helps the quality above and beyond, did I find an error or did I not? I see them being involved in conversations with product owners. I see them talking about risk. I see them talking about, okay, when we are deploying, once it is deployed, then doing exploratory testing in production. One of my favorite buzzwords right now is observability. So what are my unknown unknowns that I only find in production? Hands-on testing, and I believe so strongly that exploration is something that we will need so much more in the future, because the amount of unknown unknowns is increasing. So people with exactly that skill are going to be in high demand, and they will probably also need other skills as well, because there's just so much to do. And I forget where I heard it. It was Agile Testing Days. I think it was Damien Sinodos. He talks instead of T-shaping people, of having comb-shaped people. So I have a lot of things that I can do generally, and instead of just having one or two things that go down where I have a specialty in, I have multiple, and some of them are small. Right, I'm just learning them that I don't have much of a specialty, but it's a bit more than maybe that person, and I can help. Or I have a very deep specialty. And I think getting teams together of comb-shaped people who still, and this is the balance you have to get, no one person is the silo. It can't be the case that for testing, for database, for whatever, no, when one person is the silo, and yet they are the person that brings maybe the most specialty, encourages the rest of the team to always have this, has a certain degree of ownership, and in an agile sense, not in a this is mine and I won't share my knowledge, but I am the one that cares the most about this. I have the passion. This is one thing that I talk to about developers about. I'm like, I want you all to do testing as well, but all of any developer who says, oh, we don't need a tester in the team because we can do anything, then I often ask the question, okay, are you really willing to start going to testing conferences and talking about testing only in your team and making sure that you stay up to date? And often the answer is, no, not really. So my point is, the people who want to specialize, who have the passion, I want those to be in those specialist roles, but not in the sense of I have everything, but I am helping everywhere. I am bringing my perspective everywhere, and I'm teaching everyone on this team to know more about the thing I'm doing. And at the same time, I'm learning from everyone on this team about how I can help them and how we can work together. And I think that's a long way. I haven't found the simple word for that yet, but that's how I see the role evolving, and it does evolve. 5 years, well, when we met, I said testers should not program. That was a thing I believed. I now believe that it's very useful for testers to be able to do some coding. 3 years ago, I would have said testers shouldn't also be involved in the team in writing maybe production code. I've got 3 examples of testers who do that now. That's fine. Every team is going to find its way of who needs what in different ways, and that's great. So I think, yes, we need people who have this testing specialty, and we need them in teams, and the whole team always needs to be learning and growing together.
So if I understand correctly, it means that, let's say we have a team, let's keep it really small just for our demonstration purposes, right? Let's say we have a team and there's like a backend developer, a front-end developer, and a tester, right? Let's keep it small. And so the best would be if the backend knows a little bit, like in this cone shape thing, knows a little bit about front-end, so that they can communicate well with the front-end developer, which has a very deep expertise in front-end, right? But the front-end also knows a little bit about backend, and both of them know a little bit about testing, but the main passion about staying up to date and really knowing everything about testing is the person that has the testing specialty. So they are overlapping, and that helps them to communicate in a better way, and also understanding their viewpoints a little bit better. And so this is also how they are connecting, right? It's like a puzzle somehow. They're
Yeah,
like having these dots where you can connect them together. Yeah, that makes
exactly.
sense.
Yeah.
Another thing that you actually said was like Ensemble software development. Can you tell me a little bit how you do that, and how does that influence how you structure your software development processes, and why is that so important?
Yeah, so the idea of and it's well known at the moment as mob programming, and because of the connotations of the word mob, a few people in the community, Marit Piarvi is one of them, have been saying, hey, why don't we find a different name for this? And so then a new word that is going around is ensemble, because that means kind of together and as a group. And the idea is it's very similar to strong style pairing. So you have somebody who is who is driving, and another person is navigating. And the person who is driving is not allowed to think; they are not allowed to navigate. The difference is that with the ensemble, it's not just two people; it can be 5 or 10. I don't know. I've never tried it in really huge groups, apart from at conferences when it's a bit different. Um, but the idea is that all of the people who are relevant to solving a problem, including testers and product owners and the Scrum Master as well, like docu- technical documentation writers, that everybody is involved in working on this thing at the same time. So you have no friction anymore of, oh well, we're going to have to do a handover to that person, or going to have to ask this person. There is still friction, because of course there always is when we're developing, but we have everyone that we need there, and everyone rotates. So a reasonably good way to start is to say maybe about 5 minutes. So you don't want anyone to be the driver for too long. um, and you rotate. And the great thing about being the driver, I have done this, is you don't need to know anything about how to, because if you have someone who's the driver, and they know nothing about working with an IDE, then you say to them, okay, click on line 5, type this, this, and this. And if, of course, if you have someone who is the driver who is a developer, and does that full time, then you might say something like, okay, create the class that does this. But you don't want to have it too big, because then the driver's also going to start thinking. And then, of course, when you're part of the ensemble, regardless of what role you're in, you can be, even if I don't know how to do something, I can be like, we need to think about the fact that this could be null, or we need to think about the fact that we said that multi-selection has to work and I don't see that happening yet. So even without the knowledge of how to do that, I can be talking to people about that we need to do it. And then, of course, if you have the tester there, or the product, wait a second, I thought we said this, I understood it differently. Wait, if we do it like this, how am I going to test it later? Also doing, for example, TDD as an ensemble, right? And we have quality dojos where people practice just that, outside of the project, so it's safe to fail. Um, Learning about test-driven development, learning about ensemble programming, learning about design. Um, yeah, that's how that works, and it's a cool way of getting new people on board, because it's a great way of sharing knowledge, because you have to talk about what you're doing. It's not just watching somebody and like, okay, well, that's a black box of stuff I don't understand. And it's also a really good way of working on some gnarly problems, because you have everybody who's potentially going to help there in the room, instead of it just being one person going, I have no idea how to solve this.
But so, as I understand it, it's one thing that you can take out of your toolbox and you say, well, we do this right now for, let's say, an hour, or, like today and tomorrow. Or is it something that this is how we develop software, and every day when I'm coming in my office in the morning, I'm going not into my office or on my desk, but I'm going in this room and I have all the other people and we are doing that together
Yeah.
day in and day
At
out?
Bradex, at Bradex, it's something that we definitely have in our toolbox, and many projects use it. At time they say, we're going to do this once a sprint, or for a specific thing, or whatever. I know of companies who do it for hours on end. That is their preferred way of developing. I think that can take a bit of time to get used to. And like I say, I know examples of people who do that very, very, very frequently. Um, I would recommend trying it out. It
Hmm.
sounds very counterintuitive, and yes, at the beginning it can be a bit like, and we've had examples of this. Like, okay, I could have developed, I could have written the code for this in in a lot less time. If it's something that's very trivial, then you can definitely feel the pain. If it's something that's very difficult, you will feel the pain of getting started. But what you're gaining isn't. This is one of the nice things, right? Things TDD and ensemble testing will slow my team down. Well, maybe sometimes they need to be slowed down, because we need to be thinking of, are we doing this right? Is this what the customer needed? Is this the good way of doing this? Are we making this testable? Those are questions that it's best to ask while we're writing the code and not later on. And so sometimes that slowing down and actually being more explicit about what we're doing can be really, really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I see it definitely as, in certain instances and certain times and certain questions that we have to ask, or, certain times in a project, as you say, at the beginning, if you're not even sure what is exactly what we are developing, I think this is can be really powerful. Maybe what's a little bit connected to that, and I would like to know how you think about it and maybe how you practice it at Bredex, is code reviews, right? So do you do code reviews? And what I would like to know is, are testers part of code reviews? And if so, why? Or if not, why not?
So yes, we do code reviews. Depending on the team, that will be less formalized in the sense of, hey, this was it. So I mean, and this is the great thing about context. If you have a team that have been stably working together on a technology and on a domain for quite a long time, I'm not saying that you'll never find problems in the code review. I'm saying that you might find fewer problems, right? Because everyone's practiced. And that's part of a quality strategy that can work, and we need to be aware of it. We shouldn't just rely on that. So that in those kind of teams, you will have more informal, hey, I did this, it was a bit harder than I thought it was, or I'm having some problems here, can you come and look at this with me? Then you'll have teams that have it a lot more formalized because it's part of their definition of done. And I recommend that teams at least try having that as part of their definition of done. And then they will have things like pull requests. So even in terms of the technical process, until it's been reviewed by someone else, it can't be pushed. Um, are testers involved? Yes, sometimes. I have a couple of examples of testers who really say, okay, I'm going to take the pull request, or I'm going to do it with someone else, or I'm going to go and sit next to the developer because I'm currently writing API tests, or I want to be able to write UI tests afterwards for this. And I want to know how it works. I need to ask questions. I have risks that I'm, you know, looking at the code helps me see, okay, that's a risk I didn't even know about, and here's a risk I had, and at least in terms of how I see this piece of code written, it's probably less likely, so I can guide my testing later on so much better. I know that in one of the teams, one of our testers created like a checklist for code reviews, from the perspective of a tester of, here are the things that I'm going to be looking at. Let's get together right now and make sure that your code does that already, because otherwise I'm going to find too much low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. That's a really good thing. Yeah, and so maybe what I would like to know, especially with you know with what you told me about your practices that you have at Bredex that are quite diverse as well, depending on what teams need or what projects need and things like this. How did the pandemic shape that? I'm not sure if you're still all in the office. My assumption is not. And Ensemble programming might be a little bit trickier now in this setup. So how did that impact you, and what were some of the strategies? I mean, now you're a recent CEO, right? And there's like this big challenge for everybody, I guess. Like, I mean, it's not the easiest year to to
It
grow
really
into
has not
that
been the easiest year to do that. I have been
into
very,
the
very glad for the people around me who have, some of whom have more experience, like Andreas, and the other team leads. But yeah, so we were, I'm gonna say, we were well prepared, and to be fair, we didn't know how well prepared we were until it hit, because we had everything in place that we needed. We have a Hungarian company that's a sub company of Bredex. So I'm going to say we were remote ready, because we've been working with people from Hungary in our teams doing things. So we had a lot of the stuff that we need already available outside of our infrastructure, using things like Teams to do pairing or to do code reviews, or to even, instead of just all sitting together. Um, so we'd always said we're remote ready. That's a little bit like saying we have backups, but we've never actually tried to use them. So I think there was an element of luck that we managed, our preparations were the right ones. Um, and when the lockdown in Germany started the first time, I was so my timing is fantastic. I was actually stuck on a cruise ship in the Caribbean at the time, so I wasn't even. I was still trying to get home. Yeah, that was not fun. Um, so I was not involved in the decisions that were made there. However, I am proud of us as a company, and the people that were doing those decisions. Within, I think, a day and a half, the whole company was in home office and working basically without large problems. Um, and from since then, we do a lot more. So, do we do ensemble programming and ensemble testing remotely? Yes, one of my colleagues wrote an article on it recently about how they do it, and what the good practices are for that. We've been doing all of our strategy meetings and discussions remotely because you had to, and that's an interesting. I'm fascinating at how quickly a whole industry can adapt. And even again, customers who had sometimes been like, oh, we don't really want you to be working remotely, we'd prefer to have, when you have to, you do, and it works, and it's been working. And I'm not quite at the stage, I don't think I'll ever get to the stage where I'm glad that this is happening. I am, however, thankful for some of the things that I and we have been able to learn from it, like remote working works.
Mhm. And so at the beginning, you said, well, I'm practicing the names of people. And so I imagine that it's becoming much more challenging to be connected with like 150 people and feel a connection, and also have not only you, right, as a person that, oversees this 150, but that it's mutual, that you also feel like, I know Alex and I know our, one of our CEOs. And how do you keep that going?
Yeah, I've so first of all, for what I've just started doing now, because I'm not going to maybe see them in the in the company as much, is that for anyone who's just started, I make sure that we get like a little 15 minutes team session where I can be like, hey, this is me, and to tell them to tell them so that they hopefully notice. I try and be incredibly authentic. I don't come from the same background as other people. I don't communicate in the same way as a lot of other people. I have sometimes different values as other people. Um, and it is important to me to remain that. So I tell people, hey, you can come and talk to me. I'm never going to bite your head off if you've made a mistake. I'd rather know. I want your feedback. And I try and just be as 100% me as I possibly can. So meeting them in that kind of a context helps them maybe to see that. Um, I am painfully aware. Still haven't found out how to do this yet. I think that there are people who knew me before I was a team lead, and people I've basically grown up with, and who've been in my team for a very long time. That I think and I hope that they're still very like, ah, this is Alex. We can still talk to her. I'm painfully aware of the fact that there are people who have started in the company since I became a CEO, for whom I can't force them. I can only be myself and be explicit about what, like, I don't know this. I'm going to have to find out. Or, hey, that frustrated me at the customer as well. Or, yeah, I'm scared about that possibility too. Like, really, really being open and vulnerable about how I see things and how I do things, and hoping that they notice that. Or the other people who do know me better and know that you can come and talk to me, that they will say, look, you really actually can do that. I have a few other ideas. I want to maybe do, like, I don't know, sort of remote coffee with projects that I don't have quite so much contact with, just literally inviting myself along and be like, hey, can I have coffee with you? And let's just chat. Because I'm aware that for some people that may be like, oh my God, the boss is coming in and looking at us. And I think I still have the character. I think I'm still close enough and kind enough that people are like, oh, it's cool, Alex wants to come and talk to us. But you never know. It's important to me, and it's difficult. Those two things are true.
Yeah, very often they are true for many things. Like, well, Alex, I think we actually reached the end of our time together today. So I was really happy that you have been here with me. Is there something that you think we haven't talked about that you want to, let my listeners know? Something that you want to share with them, maybe especially with people that have a non-traditional background, that you can give them, some advice that you can give them on their way.
I'd say I'd say believe in yourself and believe that you belong. By finding a network of people who are different like you or different in different ways, you will always have people that you can go and talk to. And yeah, you belong here. You do. So
Yeah.
if that's something that you needed to hear from me, then I can tell you that.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Thank you so much, Alex, and enjoy your day. And thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Okay,
Thanks,
bye
Michaela.
bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed another episode of the Software Engineering Unlocked podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll talk to you again in 2 weeks. Bye.